in one things that when I was first started reading the book that I didn't expect it to kind of be about that was like the reverence you kind of show for medicine and science. Why do you think now with a lot of people anti-vaccination and all that sort of thing? Why do you think people don't have that same trust and appreciation for medicine now? Or is it just rebellion because they don't want to be forced, or why do you think that is?
I'd say your guess is as good as mine. I could go off on that. Uh, a lot of it is pure politics. It became a partisan issue. Uh, a lot of it is, misinformation. Uh, actively lies about safety and other things that have been actively spread. I know people who, didn't want their kids are in their 20s and tried to convince their kids not to get vaccinated because she believed that it's ridiculous, but she believed that 3 or 4 years from now they'll be killed because they'll start producing their cells will start producing spike proteins and it will clog the entire body. I mean, this is utter complete stupidity, but she actually believes it, and why. I remember when the internet first got going and there was always misinformation on it, but these days a lot of that misinformation is organized. Some of it is state sponsored. But back then there was a theory that all the bad information on the internet was going to drive people to reliable sources like the New York Times. Would that theory had been proving true? Quite the reverse. It looks like everything is equal wherever the source is. It's just crazy.
Yeah, you can fall
You
into an
know,
echo chamber of what you already want to believe. You can find something that
yeah,
seems to prove it.
right. And then you got the algorithms, from uh, Facebook and so forth that your engagement, outrage feeds, all that. You know, it's a mess. And
Yeah,
as I say, some of it is very consciously done by Russia. I think that's been established. Uh, some of it has been spread by people who are making money out of it. The Times did a story about a Florida doctor. Uh, some of it is done by people who are, you know, legitimately think vaccines do all sorts of harmful stuff that none of which that they do. But you can't convince them. They just, there is two of my favorite quotes from all the historical figures whom I've ever read about. One was from the book Rising Tide you mentioned, which is about the greatest natural disaster ever to hit the United States. It was actually a Mississippi River flood that flooded almost 1% of the population, and as a percent of GDP, was more than 5 times bigger than Hurricane Sandy. You may recall that
yeah,
hit New York City a few years ago, and it was significantly bigger than Hurricane Katrina. I live in New Orleans, so I'm talking to you from Washington, D.C. right now. Very familiar with Katrina. But anyway, there was an engineer in there, and that flood for, was, there was a lot of water in the Mississippi River. That was the main problem.
mm,
But the way the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built levees was and tried to control the river was a contributing factor to the disaster. And there was an engineer named James Kemper who looked at what the Army was doing and tried to stop it. And he said, it's much easier to believe than to think. Even so, it's astounding how much more believing there is than
mm.
thinking. So,
It's much more
you
easier
know,
to believe than to think.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's it. People just choose to believe something. I don't know.
Yeah.